All right, so Pakistan has just completely rewritten the rules for digital assets with its new Virtual Asset Act. If you're an investor with capital in this space, or even just thinking about getting in, you need to understand this new framework. It isn't just important, it's absolutely essential for protecting your investment. So let's break down exactly what you need to know.
And that brings us to the big question, right? The one on every investor's mind. Is Pakistan's digital asset market a safe bet for your money? Well, the answer is tucked away inside this new legal framework, which draws some really clear lines between regulated, stable assets and just pure, high-risk speculation. Let's start by looking at this new playing field.
Okay, first things first, we're dealing with a whole new playing field here. This Virtual Asset Act is now the official rulebook. And for you, as an investor, this isn't just some boring legal document. It's your guide. It's how you're going to spot opportunities and, just as importantly, steer clear of regulatory trouble in Pakistan's digital economy.
This law is really built on a careful balancing act. And for you, the investor, that boils down to two key things: security and opportunity. On one hand, the act is designed to protect your capital by cracking down on illegal financing. On the other, it's meant to create a stable environment where innovation can actually thrive. And overseeing this whole thing is a new regulator you have to know: the Pakistan Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, or PVARA.
Now we get to the first critical filter in your due diligence. What does this law actually define as a virtual asset? I mean, you can't possibly assess an investment's risk if you don't even know whether it's on the regulator's radar to begin with.
The core definition in the Act is pretty broad. A virtual asset is basically a digital representation of value that you can trade and use for either payment or investment. Now, on the surface, that seems simple enough, right? But the law has this crucial little clause that just dramatically expands its scope.
And here it is. This is the little exception that completely changes the game. That key phrase, distributed ledger technology, that's the one to watch. What it means is that if you take a traditional asset and you move it onto a blockchain, the old protections don't apply anymore. This is the critical detail.
So the takeaway here is what we're calling the DLT override. It means even a traditional security or financial instrument that you're totally familiar with gets reclassified as a virtual asset the moment it's tokenized or put on a blockchain. And that pulls a huge range of assets under the PVR's watchful eye.
So, once you've figured out that an asset falls under the Act, what's your next step? Well, it's gauging its risk. And the law gives you a really clear tool for this. It's called the stability test. And it's all about separating tokens based on what's actually backing their value.
The law separates stable tokens into two main categories. You've got fiat reference tokens, which are pegged to a single official currency and have to be redeemable at par. So one token can be swapped for 1 unit of that currency. Then there are asset reference tokens, which are backed by a whole basket of things, like gold or real estate, and they have to be fully collateralized.
You know, the standard for these stable tokens is incredibly high. For those fiat reference tokens in particular, the law demands 100% reserve backing. This is designed to give you, the investor, some real confidence that for every single digital token floating around, there's 1 unit of actual currency sitting safely in a vault somewhere.
Now, for an investor, this might be the most important part. The law requires both types of these stable tokens to have their reserves independently audited and then disclosed to the public. This means an issuer can't just claim their token is stable, they have to prove it. And that is a critical layer of protection for you.
Of course, not every single digital token is going to fall under these new rules. So it's absolutely vital to understand the boundary lines, to know exactly which assets are exempt from the PVRA's oversight.
Let's start with NFTs. The SEBC Act uses a substance over form principle here. What that means is, it doesn't matter if something is labeled an NFT or a collectible. Nope, what matters is how it's actually being used out there in the market.
So an NFT is only exempt if it meets these specific negative conditions. It can't be used for payment, it can't be used for investment, and its value can't be tied to another regulated asset like a security. The second an NFT starts acting less like art and more like a speculative financial tool, the regulator can step right in.
The other major exemption is for what they call closed ecosystem tokens. Think of something like an in-game currency. But just look at how strict this test is. To be exempt, a token has to meet all 7 of these conditions. It can't leave its platform, you can't cash it out for real money, and you can't trade it on a secondary market. Honestly, this sets the bar so high that very few tokens are actually going to qualify.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here. So now, let's pull it all together into a simple, actionable checklist that you can use to evaluate any digital asset in Pakistan.
Here it is, your 3-step mental model. First, the substance and technology test. Ask yourself, is it used for investment, or is it on a blockchain? If yes, then it's a virtual asset. Simple. Second, the stability test. Is it a fiat-referenced or an asset-referenced token? And finally, the ecosystem test. Does it pass that super strict 7-point check to be exempt? This hierarchy right here is your roadmap.
Ultimately, this new law gives you a really powerful tool, a clear 3-step framework to separate the promising regulated assets from all the unregulated risks out there. So the final question isn't really about the law anymore, it's about your portfolio. Now that you have this framework, which assets are going to pass your due diligence? That's the real challenge and the opportunity for every single investor in Pakistan's new digital market.